You've probably heard the advice your whole life: just be kind, kill them with kindness, lead with empathy. And that might work with a difficult boss, a moody friend, or even a partner who's having a bad day. But when you apply that same approach to a narcissist, someone whose entire identity is constructed around a deep need to control, manipulate, and feel superior, it backfires in a very specific and very dangerous way. Here's why. A narcissist doesn't interpret your kindness through the lens of goodwill. They don't receive your forgiveness as grace. They don't take your empathy as a moment of connection. They translate all of that through a warped filter. One where kindness equals weakness, where patience signals compliance, and where your continued efforts to be understanding are seen not as strength, but as evidence that they own the emotional chessboard. The narcissist thrives on emotional leverage. They want to know they can hurt you and still have you return. They need proof that no matter how much they lie, insult, gaslight, or dismiss you, you'll still be there. Not just physically. You could leave the room or even the relationship, but emotionally. As long as they know they still matter to you, they still have power. That's the currency, that's the drug, that's the game. So let's talk about what actually happens when you're consistently nice to a narcissist. You reinforce their illusion that they are untouchable, that you, like everyone else in their orbit, are just another pawn they can break and reassemble at will. You're not helping them grow, you're helping them reinforce their pathology. They learn nothing except this: I can do what I want and they'll still be here. That's not love. That's servitude, and I get it. It's hard to stop being nice, especially if you're someone who has built your identity around being the peacemaker, the empath, the fixer. You want to believe that if you can just love them enough, they'll see the light. That if you're calm when they're cruel, if you're giving when they're taking, they'll somehow wake up and appreciate you. But here's the brutal truth. Narcissists don't wake up when you're nice. They wake up, if ever, when the system that benefits them stops working. When you stop rewarding their bad behavior with your loyalty, this is where a shift has to happen, not in them, but in you. Because when you realize that kindness to a narcissist is not only ineffective, but actually enabling, something clicks. You begin to understand that you're not dealing with someone who lacks love. You're dealing with someone who uses love as a weapon. And that changes the rules entirely. Now, that doesn't mean you become cruel or vindictive. That would only entangle you further in their game. What it means is you stop performing emotional labor for someone who sees your empathy as an exploitable resource. You stop explaining yourself over and over to someone who's never been interested in understanding you in the first place. You stop contorting your boundaries to accommodate someone who violates them the second they feel threatened by your independence. And maybe the hardest part of all, you stop hoping that your goodness will be enough to make them care. It's not, because this isn't about how good you are. It's about how disconnected they are from empathy, from accountability, from the kind of humility required for real connection. You don't fix that with kindness. You don't inspire that kind of change with understanding. You confront it by refusing to feed it. You dismantle it by removing your energy from the equation. Being nice to a narcissist isn't noble. It's dangerous. It prolongs your suffering, it deepens their delusion, and it keeps both of you trapped in a cycle that was never designed to be equal. It's not your job to heal them. It's your job to protect yourself from becoming collateral damage in their endless quest for control.
Yeah, just
So the next time you're tempted to be nice, in hopes they'll change, ask yourself, am I being kind, or am I betraying myself to keep someone else comfortable in their dysfunction? Because the most powerful form of kindness is the kind you extend to yourself, the kind that says, I deserve to be safe, I deserve to be respected, and I will no longer play a role in my own emotional erosion just to make someone else feel powerful. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. And clarity is what finally begins to shift the dynamic, not by changing them, but by freeing you. When you stop being nice to preserve the illusion, and start being honest to protect your reality, that's when everything changes. Let's talk about the shift from validation to consequence, because that's where the real transformation happens. Most people trapped in a relationship with a narcissist are stuck in a loop of trying to earn peace. They've been conditioned to believe that if they just say the right thing, act the right way, avoid the right triggers, maybe, just maybe, the narcissist will stop punishing them. So what do? They over-explain, they walk on eggshells, they try to be perfect. Not because they're weak, but because they've been psychologically trained to associate emotional safety with approval. And narcissists are experts at using that dynamic to maintain control. Here's what's really going on underneath that pattern. You're trying to manage chaos with compliance. You're using your empathy as a tool to negotiate with someone who sees your humanity as a strategic weakness. And in doing so, you give away your most powerful resource, your ability to hold them accountable, not with threats, not with aggression, but with boundaries that don't collapse every time they test you. That's the key difference between validation and consequence. Validation says, let me prove I'm good enough so you'll treat me better. Consequence says, how you treat me determines whether you get access to me at all. One is rooted in fear. The other is rooted in self-respect. And I want to be clear. This isn't about punishing the narcissist. It's about protecting your energy, your peace, your identity. Narcissists don't grow through affection. They grow more entitled. They don't pause to self-reflect because you forgave them again. They just reset the game and raise the stakes. The only time they feel genuine discomfort, the kind that forces them to reevaluate their behavior, is when the system stops working. When their words no longer manipulate you. When your silence speaks louder than your begging ever did. When your boundaries don't shake, no matter how hard they push. But here's where it gets uncomfortable for a lot of people. Emotional boundaries often require you to endure something that feels counterintuitive. Detachment. Not coldness, not cruelty, just calm indifference in the face of their chaos. And that's hard because it feels unnatural when you've spent your life making sure everyone else is okay. You want to react, you want to defend yourself, you want to be understood, but understand this, the narcissist wants that too, because your emotional reaction tells them they still have power. So what do you do instead? You begin by observing rather than absorbing. You stop explaining your boundaries and just enforce them. You don't argue over lies, you just disengage. You stop offering empathy to someone who uses it against you, and you replace it with neutrality. And neutrality in the narcissist's world is devastating. It tells them they're not getting what they want, and worse, it tells them they're no longer important enough to affect you. This kind of shift isn't about playing games, it's about ending one. You're stepping out of the role they've assigned you, the appeaser, the caretaker, the emotional sponge. And the moment you stop playing that part, they lose control of the narrative. What does that look like in practice? It means not responding to every message. It means not explaining your silence. It means not chasing apologies that will never come. It means choosing peace over closure and progress over permission. It means living your life without constantly editing it to avoid their disapproval. And yes, that will provoke them. They'll accuse you of being cold, selfish, unloving. But take a moment to ask yourself, what kind of love requires me to abandon myself to prove it? Because if being loved means being broken down, silenced, or shamed, then what you're experiencing isn't love. It's control dressed up as intimacy. When you shift from validation to consequence, you don't just protect yourself. You also send a clear message. I am not available for manipulation. I am not here to fix your wounds at the expense of mine, and I am no longer a participant in my own emotional betrayal. That's not unkind. That's evolution. And evolution is what terrifies a narcissist, because it means they can no longer predict you, guilt you, or shape you into someone smaller. So don't wait for them to wake up. Wake yourself up. Don't soften your boundaries in the name of love. Strengthen your standards in the name of self-worth. Because when your peace becomes non-negotiable, everything that's not aligned with it starts to fall away, and what remains is your power fully intact. You don't need to be louder to be heard by a narcissist. You need to be quieter in a way that says, I no longer need your permission to matter. There comes a point after the arguments, after the breakdowns, after the endless cycles of trying to fix, explain, and be enough, when you finally realize something that changes everything. You don't need to change the narcissist. You need to detach from them. And that shift isn't just psychological. It's spiritual, because up until now, your energy has been externally focused, constantly managing their moods, anticipating their reactions, doing emotional acrobatics to avoid their next eruption. You've been trying to control chaos by sacrificing parts of yourself, your time, your voice, your boundaries, your truth. But what if the answer isn't about doing more? What if the most powerful move isn't another attempt to get through to them, but a decision to reclaim your peace and stop handing it over like it's negotiable? This is the moment where true change begins, not for them, but for you. See, narcissists don't respond to affection the way most people do. They don't feel inspired by your growth or touched by your loyalty. What shakes them, what unnerves them, what actually exposes them is detachment. Not rage, not tears, but the quiet, grounded energy of someone who no longer reacts. Someone who has removed their emotional availability without warning, without drama, and most importantly, without explanation. And here's the psychological depth behind it. Detachment isn't indifference. It's not shutting off your humanity. It's choosing to stop being emotionally invested in someone who is addicted to controlling how you feel. Narcissists feed on emotional energy. It doesn't matter if that energy is love, pain, confusion, or even hate. As long as they are at the center of your emotional universe, they feel relevant. But the second you stop responding, stop obsessing, stop needing closure, they lose their supply. And for a narcissist, that's existential. They depend on your engagement to sustain their inflated identity. But when you detach, you become a mirror, not the kind that flatters their ego, but the kind that reflects their emptiness back at them. Your silence becomes a truth they can't twist. Your distance becomes a boundary they can't cross. And no, it won't be easy. Detachment isn't a switch you flip. It's a practice. It's the daily decision to choose your healing over their approval. It's sitting with discomfort instead of reaching back out. It's reminding yourself over and over again that peace without them is better than chaos with them. And it requires something most people don't realize they've been giving away: their attention, not just in the obvious ways like answering texts or revisiting the past, but in subtle ways too. Ruminating, rehearsing conversations, replaying moments, hoping you could have said it differently. All of that is still energy spent on someone who has made it clear they are not willing to grow with you. So here's the radical truth. You don't change a narcissist by doing anything to them. You change the dynamic by becoming unavailable to their dysfunction. That's your leverage, not your love, not your logic, not your forgiveness, your absence, your lack of response. Your decision to live a life that no longer revolves around decoding mixed signals or recovering from emotional whiplash. Because here's what happens when you detach. You remember who you were before you were conditioned to shrink. You start hearing your own voice again. You make space for relationships that don't require performance. You become someone who is no longer defined by the trauma bond, but by the strength it took to break it. And that's when you win, not when they apologize, not when they finally realize what they lost, but when you realize that their recognition was never the prize. Your freedom was. So if you've been wondering what it takes to truly shake a narcissist, let me tell you, it's not confrontation. It's elevation. It's you rising so far beyond their reach that they can no longer manipulate the weather in your world. They don't need your anger. They don't deserve your kindness. They need your absence. Because when you stop trying to be the exception that heals them and start becoming the example that heals you, they're left with nothing but the echo of who you used to be, an echo they can no longer control, and a version of you they can never access again.